What's going on, beautiful people? We are back again with another Mental Max Out podcast. I'm your host, Akeem Robinson. And for those of you joining us for the first time, thanks for checking it out. Mental Max Out is all about helping people change their perspectives, think differently, and get out of the hole. If you're back again, I celebrate your willingness to continue growing and challenging your mind. Remember, if you like what you hear today, make sure you hit that subscribe button or whatever platform you're listening from. Share it with a friend and follow us on social media at Mental Max Out Podcast. So let's get right into it. This past weekend, Allison's dad was in town, and it's always a good time when he's in town because we can take a break and somebody can watch Serena, and it's always really cool. But I got to learn a little bit more about Allison's dad because when he wasn't watching Serena, he was so hyped about getting to watch the Tour de France. And if what you don't know about the Tour de France, it's a 21-day bike race of 21 stages, and each stage is over hundreds of miles of riding on a bike. And I've never really paid attention to this before, so I was intrigued. When I was watching it with him, all I could think about was how these large groups of cyclists were riding so fast. But it didn't look like that on TV. They looked like they were just out for a joyride, as if they were just cruising down the streets of France. And as a viewer like me, it started to creep into my mind, I think I can do that. That doesn't look that hard. It doesn't look like they're really working that hard. But that's the thing. I didn't see the amount of hours they put into their training just to get to that point. I didn't see the countless sacrifices they had to make, the true grit they had to put in to even be considered one of those riders for this moment. How often do we do that? Do we look at someone else's path, someone else's journey, and start to compare? Start to look at other things that others are doing, and we start to make it seem as if it's really easy. I don't know about you, but all the time, I usually get into these huge thoughts of imposter syndrome, scrolling on social media and seeing all these influencers talking about, stop what you're doing. What you're trying to sell isn't working. See how I made $1 million by doing this. And then it starts to hit me because I feel like I'm behind. I then start to think of all the things I'm not doing. And I see all these other people's success, and I start to get a little jealous. Because for me, I'm not in that boat. I'm in the middle of a dissertation. And every sentence that I write, it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. And in a lot of those situations, I feel like I'm moving at a snail's pace, just chugging along, trying to get my dissertation done. But that's the thing, just chugging along. Everybody is doing that. Everyone is trying to figure it out. We're so hard on ourselves because we think we should have it figured out. And when we don't, that's when the imposter kicks in. The doubt starts to creep into your mind, and then you believe all those lies. Because in actuality, we're all just trying to figure it out. We forget that social media is just a highlight reel. The people that we see, follow, admire, yes, those people are having really great things happen to them. And they're making really good money. But at the end of the day, it's not easy. And when we start to look at it through a highlight reel all the time, we start to discredit what really goes into it. So today, we're going to break some of these walls down, change that narrative of imposter syndrome. Because you might be working for a baller boss, but your boss didn't just turn out to be a baller. There were so many things that happened throughout their life that's the reason we follow them. That's the reason we look up to them, because of what they do now. So when we look at the term imposter syndrome, it is the feeling of being a fraud, doubting your accomplishments, and fearing the exposure of becoming a fake, despite evidence of success and competence. So even though you're successful, you can still feel like a fraud because we think somebody might expose something that we just haven't uncovered yet. So what do we do about it? The first thing you have to do is acknowledge your feelings. One of the hardest things I try to get people to understand is your feelings are valid. You have to acknowledge where you are if you want to start to take steps forward in your life. If you can acknowledge your feelings, you can recognize the fact that imposter syndrome is a very common experience and that many successful people feel the exact same way as you do. Once we can actually acknowledge our feelings of this moment, we can accept the fact that imposter syndrome doesn't mean you don't belong. One of the biggest fears we have is not belonging to a group. Me in the middle of this dissertation, I deal with that every day. But when I snap out of it, I start to realize that every day I'm moving one step closer towards being an expert. Number 2, you need to reframe your thoughts and challenge your negative self-talk. If you have imposter syndrome, that means negative self-talk is close by. So what we have to do is we have to reframe it and put positive in it. Because now that we can put a positive in it, we can start to move in a better direction. I used to say, I don't know if I'm going to be a good father. I don't know how I'm going to be as a dad. And what that was creating was a negative feeling of me being a father. So what I had to start doing was changing it to a positive. So now I say, every day I'm figuring it out. Every day I'm becoming a better dad than I was yesterday. Once we reframe our thoughts, we can start to pay attention to our inner dialogue. And we can make notes of how we're speaking to ourselves. When I'm working with clients, one of the biggest things that I hear in their talk is the fact that it's very negative, but we don't know that. So we go through the day with these negative thoughts, these negative feelings because our inner dialogue is negative. So one thing you can start to do if you're trying to reframe your thoughts are making a note, just writing down those negative thoughts. When did it happen? Did it come up in the middle of the day? When you made a mistake? When you didn't reach the deadline? We have to know when these moments happen because now we can use those as windows to reflect, to see when these moments occur. So now we can put positives in replace of those. Another thing I like to ask people are, when you have imposter syndrome and that feeling start to creep within you, I ask them this simple question, and you can ask that yourself. Do you really think that about yourself? Do you really believe those negative thoughts that you're saying? The answer that comes out of their mouth is absolutely not. Well, of course not. So then I say, so why are you saying it to yourself? If we can replace the negative dialogue and know when they come up, we can start to put positive in place of it. Here's something you can start to do. And this is one of the things that I counsel people on doing. Write down your inner dialogue. What is it saying to you? How is it trying to make you feel in that moment? And once you start journaling your inner dialogue throughout different times of the day, we can now start to consider an alternative explanation, a different way of answering that. So for example, instead of you saying, I'm worthless, I don't do enough, I'm not working hard enough, and knowing when those happened, we can now start to replace those with, I am working hard enough. I am doing enough. I'm figuring it out. I'm learning the things I need to do. By replacing those things, we can now start to move ourselves in a better direction. Say you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm not sure if that's the place I want to go. Well, that's fine. Practice gratitude. Regularly taking notes of how you feel and what you're grateful for is another way to start to kick those bad and intrusive thoughts out. We live in a world today where it's so easy to get caught up in the negative, to look at all the things we don't have, because everyone and everything around us is showcasing and highlighting all the things they do have. But when we practice gratitude, we have to actually think about what we're happy about in the now. What makes us smile when we move throughout the day? And say those things. Verbalize those things. It can be your significant other. Tell them how much you appreciate them. It can be the fact that you're thankful you have a car. Say that out loud. By saying it out loud, you then become better at practicing gratitude. Another thing you can do to start to reframe how you look at things is being kind to yourself. I know what I just said sounds so easy and so simple, but guess what? If it was, we wouldn't have phrases like, I'm my own worst critic. It's me versus me. Those sayings automatically pit us against ourselves. They automatically make us feel like we have to compete with the person within. We have to learn to be kind to ourselves and treat yourself with the same kind of compassion you would give to a friend. You wouldn't talk down to a friend and say, well, I'm my friend's toughest critic. That sounds ridiculous. But when it comes to ourselves, it just rolls right off of our tongue. That was so stupid of me. You'll never get this right. But that's not the way we should be talking about and to ourselves. So practice being kind to yourself. How would you talk to that friend within? How would you show that friend within love, compassion, and a deeper sense of feeling validated and heard? When we're able to start to do these things, we can then focus on what we can control. In many situations of imposter syndrome, we want to control every single aspect of things. The only thing we can control is ourselves. So shifting our perspective and challenging the situations we face at hand is the best way to look at any opportunity and learn and grow from it. So we can start to tell ourselves, what do I need to do in this moment? How can I start to speak to myself in order to go forward instead of trying to control everything? One of the biggest lessons I've tried to incorporate into my teachings of helping people are, what are you listening to? When it comes to reframing how we think about things and how we go about doing things daily, consuming positive content, listening to positive things goes a long way in the development of who we are. I would tell people all the time, when I was in college, I always listened to rap music. Always. And I'm not saying anything bad about rap music, but now at this stage of my life, I only like to listen to it when I'm working out. At night, I don't listen to it because I'm trying to mellow my brain out. I'm trying to be in tune with how I'm feeling about the whole day. So what we consume will dictate how we move in our lives. Last week, I talked about how habits are compounding and they build on top of each other. Your emotions and your moods are very similar to that. So if you're surrounding yourself with positive people, guess what you're going to bring within you? A feeling of more positivity, welcoming better emotions, just because you're surrounding yourself with a positive view, people that have a better outlook. But on the other hand, if you surround yourself with those energy vampires, those people that suck the life out of you, and you know who I'm talking about, and if you're right next to them right now, don't give them eye contact because it's going to be really awkward if you do. But those people that suck the life out of you, try to control how much you're around them. Try to control how you contribute to that conversation, because an energy vampire only looks to have more people pile on top of that negative energy. When it comes to reframing that mindset and our language of stepping away from that imposter syndrome-like feeling, we can use positive language, replacing negative words and phrases with positive ones. As I just said earlier, instead of saying, I'll never get this right, I'm always failing, changing it to being, I've learned something valuable. I'm now more mindful of who I'm becoming. Be mindful of the language you use and choose the words to empower you. You know everything about you. So you have to make sure that whatever you're putting in you is building you and not tearing you down. When I first started coaching, this was one of the greatest lessons I've ever heard in my life. And I'm giving it to you today for free. Are you ready? Your self-talk is the most influential conversation you will ever have. I wish somebody told me that when I was an athlete. I wish somebody told me that before I dropped down on my knee to propose to Allison. Your self-talk is the most influential conversation you will ever have. So how do we do that? Keep a record of your achievements. I know what you're thinking. Keeping a record of what I have, the accomplishments in my life, doesn't that seem a bit arrogant? Comes off as a bit cocky? No. Maintaining a journal of your success only fulfills you with positive feedback. It gives you landmarks of great milestones in your life. And so, from one end, people might tell you that's arrogant and cocky. But what I like to coach people on is saying that we forget the amazing things we've done. And so when you take journal of those things, you can look back and see how far you've come. You can see all the steps that you were willing to take. When we look at these things and we have a positive outlook on them, guess what? We leave no room for the negative experiences to creep back into our minds. We leave it no room to say who we are, because when we look at our journal of milestones and accomplishments, we know who we are. Remember, yourself works so hard to get to where you are, but it's gonna take time. So writing down positive experiences, compliments, things that you've received throughout your life is just another form of reflecting and having a positive reinforcement to what if things don't go as planned? What if what I've been doing is not working? So now you can go back to this journal and feed yourself with the positive. We need to normalize spending a few minutes each day of visualization. Seeing yourself achieving goals and succeeding. Just as quickly as a negative thought creeps into your mind, and now we have doubt, fear, uncertainty, we can now actually start to look at it and say, wow, once I do this, look who I'll be. Once I take these next steps in my life, look how far I'm going to move with my family and how much better I will become. Imagine the positive feelings associated with your success. A big issue that I see people that struggle with doubt and fear is because they're not setting realistic expectations. Once we can set realistic expectations, we can recognize that perfection is actually not obtainable. Setting achievable goals is. Because once we can achieve goals, we can celebrate the small progress, the victories that it took for us to make it. We need to understand that creating a benchmark and it just being a baby step forward is another way to reaching an attainable and realistic goal for you that makes it fun to do, that makes life now, you're not just going day to day. It's same old, better than I deserve. It's now I'm really pushing towards something. I'm becoming something, and I'm so excited for the next moment and steps in my life. We often compare ourselves to people in completely different situations than us. And for a lot of us, it can be really easy to do that. But what I'm trying to help you understand is don't try to set out to be exactly like them, because we don't know what it took to be them. But we can remember that your journey is unique for you. And so when you're creating who you are, put attainable goals in there. Celebrate those victories. Can I be a little real with you for a second? At the end of the day, when it comes to that imposter syndrome, sometimes we just got to do the dang work. We just got to go forward. Back at Clemson, me and my teammates, we used to say this all the time when we used to be training in the weight room and there was a big lift and we could see somebody nervous. We would say, that person is paralyzed by fear. That's what imposter syndrome does. It paralyzes us to take the next step. Have you ever procrastinated on something like a test, a deadline? And now that it's the night before, we're stressed. We're panicked. We're putting our loved ones in that same web of stress and desperation. All the while, we could have did it ahead of time. We could have knocked all those things out. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 30 minutes here. And now the night before, we're preparing, fully trying to get it ready because we spent so much time in small amounts. We spend more time doing things at the last minute. That only contributes to why you don't feel worthy of it. Putting in the time is not hours every day. It can be 20 minutes here, 10 minutes here, an afternoon there. Because now that is putting in the necessary time for you and still giving enough to the other things you want to do. How often do you find yourself in that last second rush? How often do you find yourself comparing yourself to someone else and looking at all the things they have? Why don't I have that? Instead of just going forward. I'm going to give you a little warning. To defeat imposter syndrome, you have to embrace the opportunities that are meant for you. I heard a Marine come and speak to a group of kids I was coaching one time, and the first words that came out of his mouth was, you have to embrace the suck. I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes a lot of those goals and dreams that you want will require you to embrace the suck. When I first became a coach, I was so excited because I was finally in a position where people were going to see how good of a coach I was. I kept telling myself, I'm going to be the greatest strength coach in the nation. And when I finally got that opportunity, I was like, yes, here we go. Football, championships, wins, bonuses. And I remember my mentor looked at me, PI, he looked at me and said, you have cross country. And I was like, what? I couldn't believe he gave me cross country. It felt like a slap to the face. I was so upset. It took me months to get over this feeling. But then guess what happened? I started to embrace it. I started to look at it and say, you know what? This is my football team. And yeah, they may have scrawny arms, but they're going to have the best scrawny arms on the track. And guess what? Not only did my thought process start to change, the people I was working with, they started looking at me different. They started coming up to me and saying, Coach, look at these arms. Coach, look at my body. You did this. And I was like, yeah, I did. They even invited me out to a cross-country meet, and it was crazy because I was running all over the track and running all over the place, but I got to see what I did. My point to all of that is there will be opportunities that happen in your life, but they will never look the way you expect them to. I had no idea I was going to be working with cross country. I had no idea that that was going to be one of the greatest teams that I've ever coached. But I had to change my perspective. A new perspective takes you looking at it differently. Saying yes to new opportunities can lead to personal growth by keeping you in mind on the path that is set out for you. Back to that story I gave earlier about the Tour de France. Those people are at that stage because they're focused on them. They're focused on staying in their lane and saying yes to this opportunity. So in order for you to do that, be open-minded. Approach new opportunities with curiosity and a willingness to learn, because every time you say yes, something will come from it. Now, obviously, I'm saying yes to things that are not dangerous or harmful to me. Avoid making snap judgments. Just because you don't like it, be very careful not to just say no right off the bat. Give yourself time to consider the potential of it. We have to be willing to view these opportunities as chances to learn and grow, because I'm telling you, there are moments that are going to really help you once you can look at it through a different lens. We need to be able to approach every opportunity with the mindset of curiosity because it leads to development. Thomas Edison, on record, failed over 1,000 times in making the light bulb. And when they asked him about it, he said, I learned 1,000 ways not to make the light bulb. Your perspective is keeping you away from who you're becoming. When we can access this opportunity and access that thought process, guess what it starts to do to us? It starts to elevate opportunities in our lives. It starts to align us with certain people. Have you ever been in that mindset? And I hope this isn't just me, where once you started looking at it differently, you start to now make more connections. Opportunities almost seem like they start to fall into your lap because we're looking at it differently. And now we have a better access to more opportunities. When we consider the potential for growth, learning, and these new experiences, guess what? We can now put ourselves in those rooms where the doors have been closed for years. We can put ourselves in these opportunities where we're in our bag, man. We're feeling so good about who we are because nothing is stopping us. Oh, you want me to try this new project? I got you. You want me to hit this new deadline? Let's do it. It now starts to hit you differently. And then guess what? In some of those moments when you do have pros and cons, don't be afraid to take the risk, because I'm telling you, some of these things will have a high potential of risk, but the rewards are there too. We just have to look at it differently. So embrace that possibility of failure because we're learning from it. We can take steps from it. As I said earlier, embrace the suck. We have to embrace the fact that flexibility and celebrating courage. Sometimes we have to be flexible and adaptable in what we're trying to do. Because if you're like me, when I was younger, I had that list. Everybody's got that list. I'm going to do this by this age. I'm going to be at this stage in my life by 20. I'm going to have this career by 20 something. We have to be willing to change some of those things. I tell people all the time, write out your goals, but write it out in pencil. Because you can give yourself a little grace and erase it to make the right kind of change. Allowing ourselves to adjust our plans gives us grace. It gives us this ability to say, I know what I wanted, but it's a little different now. So let me just change this a little bit and now pencil it in the right way. We can acknowledge who we are and celebrate in these moments because guess what? You are ready. You're the one. You're the person that goal, dream, desire is meant for you. There's a reason why God placed that in your life, why he gave you this seed and said, yes, I want you to plant it, because I know. You're looking around like, I don't have the right soil. I don't have the right time in my life. This isn't me. But guess what? You ever had those feelings where you can't sleep because it's on your mind? You have these thoughts because it's always there. That's because it's your goal and dream. And he knew it wasn't going to be easy. So what does opportunity have to do with imposter syndrome? You have to focus on yourself, prioritize yourself, and stay in your lane by focus on what you can control. And that will lead you to finding the most important pieces in your life towards reaching success. Your journey is unique because you're the one that's meant to plant it, grow it, and cultivate it, allowing it to blossom into what it can be. But you're going to have to embrace the suck. You're going to have to reframe your brain, and you're going to have to look at it differently. Because I'm telling you, once you can do those things, you will start to have more doors open for you than you can ever imagine. At the end of the day, I don't want you to think like me, but I do want you to think differently.